Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I am your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today is Willy Daunic of 102.5 The Game. He is a former Vanderbilt basketball and baseball player. He is a talk show host at 102.5 as well as the voice of the Nashville Predators. Today's episode presented by Wellspire, Nashville's Learning and Development Center. Wellspire offers personal and professional development opportunities in a beautiful facility in the Gulch neighborhood. Stop by for an event with world-renowned speakers or host an off-site event that will wow your team or your clients. We thank our co-sponsor, the Well Coffee House, which turns coffee into water and has a mission to bring clean water to the world. Today's news is presented by our friends at Sutherland & Belk, an SEC sports-loving injury firm in Nashville. These guys will shoot you straight on your rights and your options when you have been injured in an accident. Call them at 615-846-6200 to get your questions answered. You can also visit them online at sbinjurylaw.com. Well, Richmond beats Vanderbilt 93-92 in overtime Thursday night in Richmond. Aaron Nesmith with a career-high 34 points for the Commodores. Saben Lee added 24 and Dylan Disu 11. The Commodores are now 2-1 and return home to play Austin Peay next Wednesday. Willy Daunic appears on our guest line that is brought to you by our friends at Boll & Branch, which was started by Vanderbilt graduates Scott and Missy Tannen. I've slept on Boll & Branch sheets for years. They are amazing. They are also fair trade certified, which means they are made under safe conditions by men and women treated and paid fairly. Try them free for a month. You can return them, but you will not want to. Once you get the sheets, try the mattress. That was voted best mattress of 2018. Go to bollandbranch.com. That is spelled B-O-L-L. Enter the promo code Vandy and get $50 off your first set of sheets. Our guest is Willy Daunic. Willy is in from a long road trip that was fun in some ways and maybe not so much fun in other ways from a Predators perspective. Anyway, we appreciate you joining us, and how have you been?
I have been well. Adjusted back to the Central Time Zone for the time being. All of the other time zones were represented on the recent road trip that the Predators had. It wasn't the best road trip, 1, 2, and 1. So only 3 points that they bring back home. But moving on, they've got the 3-game homestand coming up, starting with Chicago on Saturday night.
Let's get to basketball. I think you got a chance to watch Richmond and Vanderbilt last night, or at least some of it. What were your thoughts?
Well, I thought that in a lot of ways, in the big picture, it was somewhat encouraging. It's a missed opportunity. They had a great chance to win the game. Which I think would have been a really good confidence boost for this group. That, of course, for the guys coming back, they haven't had a lot of success. And for the new guys, they're just trying to find their way. So they did a lot of really good things. It's just one of those college basketball games. And I guarantee you, if you sit down and watch, and there's plenty of college basketball on the TV these days, you can watch almost anybody. I guarantee you, if you watch enough games each week, you'll find things at the end of games where you say to yourself, it came down to those very little things that separate you from winning and losing.
Well, taking in context the situation, which includes a coaching change and ending last year on a 20-game losing streak, I found more positives than negatives last night, but I did want to start with the negatives first, and then we'll get to the positives. I think my biggest thing was that I did not like their last play in regulation. It's a pet peeve of mine when teams start plays too late. They just sit out and dribble away 10, 15 seconds, and then they start the offense with 7, 8, 9 seconds. And you've got to execute at a really high level at that point with everybody locked in. Maybe the alternative is that you get a shot too quickly and a miss or even a make, and you allow the other team too much time to have a rebuttal, I guess. But I would rather take my chances and make sure I execute what I can control. And that was the main thing that I found fault with them last night.
Well, refresh my memory on one thing, because I had some interesting thoughts on the very last play in overtime. At the end of regulation, did they have the ball with the shot clock off?
They did, and I think it was 19.1 left. They reset, I think, the inbounds around midcourt or somewhere. But they get the ball in the half court, and Saben Lee just basically dribbles away 10 or 12 seconds with nothing going on. Then he makes a move or tries to make a move, can't get anywhere, and jacks up a 25-foot three that's an air ball.
Well, let me give you the other side of the coin, because I go the other way, and this is where my perspective is, and I find it interesting. You know, Jerry Stackhouse played for Dean Smith. I played for Eddie Fogler, who played for Dean Smith. So I know how Dean Smith taught the game down the line, and I would think there's plenty of parallels to what Jerry Stackhouse was taught in his 2 years for playing for Dean Smith. What we always did was, if the shot clock is off and the game is tied, you have to make sure that the team does not get a possession. And even if that means you let the clock run down very low, taking a shot that might end up being forced is better than what happened at the end of overtime. And that was my little thing. And because I thought, let's take the overtime. I thought the play that they ran for Saben Lee was a very good play, well drawn up, very good spacing, and Saben Lee made the right read. If you take a look, Dylan Disu is open, rolling back to the basket, and I'm really not sure what happened, if the pass was a little bit deflected, but how the ball went directly past Disu right to the guy in stride was kind of a worst-case scenario. But because they left enough time on the clock for Richmond to get down the court, that's what cost them the game right there. Whereas if they trigger that play 2 or 3 seconds later, then that play is happening with 3 or 2 or 1 second left rather than 7, 6, 5, where the other team has a chance to counter. So I look at it the other way. I think that when you have the ball with the shot clock off, you should absolutely do no worse than going to the next overtime.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I don't know who's right on this. It's just sort of a personal preference, and maybe you are right because you do make a good case. I did not have a problem with the overtime possession. I think, like you said, it was well drawn up. Saben is great at either hitting layups or getting fouled, so I think you had a chance. Well, you had 4 outcomes there. You had either he hits a layup, he gets fouled, or a combination of those two, which would make for a 5th outcome, or he misses the shot, or he turns it over, which the turnover is what happened. And, of course, unfortunately, you saw what happened on the other end. Richmond gets fouled, missing a dunk, and hits the free throw to win. But I guess the other thing was they didn't get Aaron Nesmith a touch either. And I guess that bothered me more on the first one that ended regulation, because how can you not let that guy take a shot if you can help it?
Well, he had an outstanding game. I mean, Nesmith is a great player. I think that is the most encouraging thing that we've seen so far. Is he looks like he's even taken a big leap from freshman year to sophomore year, which is very nice to see. He's worked on his game, and I do think he's got an NBA type of game. That being said, I do think Saben Lee is the guy I want penetrating, making it happen. I like an outlet to Aaron Nesmith. To me, it's a choice. I think either one is a good choice. Saben Lee had made some big plays down the stretch. I do think that, if I want one guy or the other pulling up for a jumper, there's no question that Nesmith is better at that. But I do think Lee is probably the best at getting to the basket, getting fouled, with that kind of thing. So I really didn't have a problem with it. If you look, it looked like Nesmith was rolling back. So if they had doubled a certain way, there would have been a kick back to the near side for a jumper for Nesmith. So I do think he was part of the play. But I think, again, with the shot clock off, the way that the rules of the game are, where there's not a whole lot of tolerance for hand checking and things like that, when you've got a guy who can attack the basket like Saben Lee, I think it's good to have the ball in his hands and let him create and have everybody space out in the right spot to give him options to kick it.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you. I think that was well drawn up. The result just didn't end well.
Cleavon Brown, I believe, is the guy that goes and sets the screen. And maybe there was a little bit of, because they got a little bit rushed at the end of regulation, maybe they went a little too early in the overtime. I just think they triggered the play with 10 seconds on the clock is what I saw. Whereas I think you trigger it with 8 or 7 to try to time it up right so that you don't give the other team a chance to counter like they had. That was the worst case scenario. And it can't happen if you trigger the play just a couple of seconds later. And that's nitpicking. It's a little thing, but the little things end up being important. But I think in the big picture, over the course of the game, I'll give you another little thing. With 0.6 seconds left on the clock after the foul, everybody's ticked off. It's maybe a little bit of a nitpick foul. Could they have let it go? Maybe. But they called the foul. So the guy makes the first one. He's going to miss the second free throw. You have a timeout left. As soon as that ball touches your fingers, you should be calling timeout. So they left the timeout on the table there. And who knows? Maybe with 0.5 or 0.4, you can't get a good shot anyway, but you have a chance to throw a baseball pass down the length of the court, and you never know what can happen. So I didn't like that they kept the timeout in their pocket there. But in the big picture, the games that I've seen pieces of all three games. I was listening mostly last night. I watched some of the highlights. But I like the plan that Jerry Stackhouse is doing. There's a lot to like, I think, about how he's running the game so far.
Well, I wonder if it was mathematically possible to even do that, because 0.6 of a second, even with an inbounds pass, I don't know that you can really do anything other than maybe deflect the ball towards the rim and hope you get a sort of a tip in, so to speak, off a baseball pass.
Well, I think there's a rule.
Okay.
If you have now, I think if it's less than 0.3, if it's 0.3 or less, then I think all you can have is a tip. But if you have 0.5 or 0.4, then I do think you can catch and shoot, and you got to do it really quick, obviously. And you're on the road, so you're probably not going to get that extra little beat. But it is mathematically possible if you have, say, 0.5. And I think, especially given the circumstances, how the referees, that's a tough one to call in that situation. You basically are giving the team the game by calling that foul. So you got to be sure that he fouled him. And so maybe he did. I had a hard time really seeing, but you called it. So I think now the fact that they called it, if the ref is human, I think they're going to give him a half a second, and that's enough time to catch and shoot. So I'd have called a timeout there and taken my chances.
Yeah, to me,
You'll
the
never
issue
know
is,
if you don't call a timeout. Catching the ball and just heaving it from 94 feet, what your chances are, 1,000,000 to 1.
Yeah, I guess my issue is, can you physically possess the ball and get the timeout ruled? I mean, in other words, are 3 or 4 tenths of a second going to tick off the clock just by?
Oh no, I don't think so. Not
okay.
If you catch it clean. If you tell the ref, I'm calling timeout as soon as this ball touches my fingers.
Yeah,
I think you get.
Okay.
Maybe a tenth goes off, but that's it.
Well, if they officiate it that way, then I agree with you. I'm not sure. That's something I've never really dug into. But I think as you present it, you're right. I'm just not sure. Is that how they actually do it?
Well, I think I've seen it enough times to know that maybe 0.2 go off, and you have 0.4. But I think there's a scenario where 0.1 goes off. You tell the referee, we're calling timeout. They don't even have anybody on the free throw line. They're intentionally missing, so you're anticipating. And so I think some time has to go off, but I don't think any more than 0.1 has to go off.
Yeah, okay. Well, if that's the case, then I would agree with you. I just wasn't sure what the situation in terms of how much time actually ticks off was. 2 more bones to pick, and then I want to get into some positives. I thought 3 of their 4 freshmen played like freshmen. They had a spell where it was something like a 15-2 run. I think that they turned it over something like 6 times in 7 possessions. I think that was almost all from freshmen. Scottie Pippen had a horrible run in there, and that's just what freshmen do. I'm not saying they can't be good players, but if you want to look at something that really killed them from last night, I think that was it. The other thing is I just don't know that they can really guard the ball very well either, based on what I saw last night.
Well, I think you're seeing that with Coach Stackhouse using Max Evans as much as he does. I think he knows that he's got some young players. I think the thing about the freshmen, not only are they young, they also look young. You know what I'm saying? Like physically, they have not developed. Like some freshmen come in and they're a little more physically mature than others. I think this group of freshmen look like freshmen. And the good news for that is I think they will grow. They'll get bigger and stronger. There was a really interesting interview that Barry Booker did with Scottie Pippen during the game against Corpus Christi. And they were talking about Scottie Pippen's huge growth spurt in college. And Barry Booker was joking, does your son have that similar growth spurt? And Scottie Pippen was kind of laughing along because obviously they don't know. But he was joking. You can tell they're hopeful. Maybe he grows a couple inches. But even if he doesn't grow taller, he is going to get stronger. He's going to have to. Right now, I think he is going to be – he has to take night in and night out in the SEC with some of the guys he's going to have to try to guard and some of the guys he's going to have to create against. But hopefully he'll get through it and get better because I think he's a critical guy to the program going forward.
The biggest positive that I took away, Willie, I thought that they played with confidence last night, which is something they did not play with a year ago. I mean, I think last year that's a game that goes one of two ways. They just kind of throw in the towel early and lose by maybe 15 after Richmond makes that run. That 6-point lead, 7-point lead with 6 or 7 minutes left. Last year's team, I think, would have not had the confidence to come back. Maybe that ends up a 15-point loss. They could take it to overtime. Look, the difference between a win and a loss is razor thin. The narrative would be a lot different just if they missed the free throw at the end, and then maybe Vandy goes into double overtime and wins it. The tone's different. The point is, they were right there on the verge of winning and losing. The breaks didn't go their way, but I liked the way they played it out, and that told me a lot.
I think it's a great point, especially in the context of just being completely shattered last year by the end of the season. Shell-shocked, really not equipped to win at all. Just going into the game, you could see that they just did not have the ability to win, whether it was they were going to struggle for 40 minutes, which really baffled me, especially at home at Memorial Gym. That was hard to watch. A team get beat on their home court for 40 minutes against teams that were not powerhouse teams. It's one thing for a top 10 team to do that to you on your court, but run-of-the-mill SEC teams had done that a couple of times. And like you said, also, close games. They did not do the little things ever. So the confidence level has to go in low. And I agree with you. I think that's one of the first things that I have noticed is I do like the buy-in. I think that Jerry Stackhouse and his staff definitely have the early buy-in, which you would hope that you would have with the new staff. But I do think that they seem to bond. They seem to be bonding well with the new coaches, and hopefully that will serve them well. Because I do think there's going to be some bumps in the road here. I think being realistic, there's going to be some rough nights. But I did like there was a lot of encouraging things last night.
Well, I look at how they took a punch. Okay. They have a 7-0 lead early in that game. Richmond comes back and is up 10 late in the first half. Vanderbilt comes out of the locker room in the second half, I believe hits 5 threes in its first 5 possessions and is back ahead. Richmond makes a run, is up 5, I think, with 4:15 to play after Gilliard hits an open 3. There was another one in there before that where Richmond, I think, spurted out a little bit and Vanderbilt came back. So basically they come back 5-6 points in the last 4 minutes. Saben Lee makes 2 huge threes. And again, I just look at that as a place where last year, given those multiple opportunities to fold, I think they would have taken one of them to do so. And again, they did not do that. I want to move on to the next point because we don't have a lot of time left. Jerry Stackhouse kind of went into overdrive and said something about, we're not trying to make this into a big 3. After a question, I think that he interpreted as something of that between Lee Nesmith and Scottie Pippen Jr. And I don't think Scottie Pippen Jr. deserves to be in that conversation yet, but I do think they may have a big 2 in Saben Lee and Nesmith. Those guys get 58 between them. and are really looking like, in an era where a backcourt can carry you, I still think they've got too many deficiencies to have a winning record, but that's a pretty nice 1-2 punch to build on right now, it appears.
And I think they did a good job last night in the key possessions of making sure that it was one of the two that were going to get the ball. So I think that was a really good job by Coach Stackhouse to do that. I agree with you. Those two guys are going to have to shoulder the load. Everybody else is going to have to be comfortable in their role, and hopefully, I think it's so important that there is improvement from those role players. And I'll give you an example. I still look at Obina. Maybe I'm crazy, but I see Obina as a guy that in this first year for Coach Stackhouse, and one of the things that was his call coming in, that's a guy I think there, and he's having trouble staying on the court without fouling, without doing a lot of things that are noticeably good. But I think he's just got to play some, and you might have to take some steps back to take the steps forward with him. That's a guy worth trying to use as a project. Hopefully Obina is willing to stick it out and stay with it. And I think the same is true that we've talked about the freshmen, but all those guys. I think it's going to be important because there's a lot of limitations to the roster right now beyond Lee and obviously Nesmith. But Nesmith is special, right? When you got a special player, I think you might have a chance on certain nights. And if the threes are going in, then you might be able to surprise a few people.
Well, the other thing that stood out was I think that you finally saw what Dylan Disu can be as an offensive player. I saw it in a scrimmage. I was very impressed with him. I think he hit 112 threes in high school last year. There was a little bit of maybe some Rod Odom to his game the other night. And the part that I'm interested to see, and I think you saw this with Nesmith somewhat last year, you didn't really see till maybe game 2 or 3 of conference play or something like that. It seems like it takes a lot of times freshmen a couple months to be in the system, and then the light clicks on. And I'm thinking back to when that's happened with Vanderbilt players. I remember that happening very clearly with Drew Maddox. It's like he was just kind of okay his freshman year and out of conference, and then the conference schedule clicks over. They get on the other side of Christmas break, and he became the player that he wound up being. I'm really anxious to see what happens when the light really turns on for him, because if that happens this year, then you might be able to bump a couple more wins up to whatever they end up with.
Yeah, I agree. And if you can shoot the ball and, if you can guard somebody and you can hit a three, when you're on a team with Saben Lee and Aaron Nesmith, two guys that I think are going to do a pretty good job of being able to get their shots and create and draw the defenses, because, hey, if you're scouting Vanderbilt, that you're going to have to help. You're going to have to do some things to contain Lee and Nesmith. So if you can spot up, you're going to get some open threes. Disu hit 3 for 9 last night. I think every one of his shot attempts was a three. That's all right. If you have confidence, and it's clear that Coach Stackhouse has confidence in him shooting the ball. If he can hit 35, 40% from three, 40% would be huge. But even if he hits 35%, that's going to be some pretty decent production as a freshman. And then hopefully the other areas of his game can come along. Defense, rebounding, all those things. He's only going to get bigger and stronger.
Willie, I've got 3 really quick mailbag questions before I get you out of here. That's cool.
Bring it on.
Today's mailbag is sponsored by Vanderbilt fan and independent insurance agent Josh Minton of Brentwood. Need home, motorcycle, auto, renters, landlord, life, or commercial insurance? Josh is the guy you need to contact. Call him at 615-933-1979. Email him at josh@hqinsurance.com. Follow him on Facebook at JDMintonHQ. He is my insurance agent. Give him a try. Tell him you heard about him here, and I think you will be very pleased. Papa Hick 4VU wants to know what has encouraged you most from the couple of games played such far, and what is concerning to you most from the games played so far.
Well, I'll try not to go and repeat stuff that we've sort of discussed, but I think in a nutshell, Nesmith is not only a very good SEC player, but he might be one of those guys that is special enough to go on to the next level. I think that's what's most encouraging. The other thing is, in the big picture, I see some of the detail. Not everything's perfect with Coach Stackhouse, but I like what they're trying to do, and I think it's clear that he has, some good principles, and the learning curve of going from the pro game to the college game looks like he's done a pretty good job so far. It's early. We'll see what starts to happen as teams scout them, and as he goes through the process of learning the league and what the other teams do. But that we'll see. I guess the concerns, they're not. This is relative to expectations, because my expectations are pretty realistic about this team. Guys like Obina and guys, and I'm forgetting his name, the kid from the European kid that has played a little bit so far. Yeah, and he's young. He's got to get bigger and stronger. But if they can develop those guys, I think that's going to be the biggest thing. So that's my concern right now. I think a little thin on the bench right now, and got to develop some of those young players.
This last one, what would you consider a successful season in the first year of the Jerry Stackhouse era? There are two ways to answer that. And one of them is just the look of how are they developing? Are they playing hard? That's one element to the answer. The other one I'm going to throw in and just get your feedback on what you think are realistic win marks. To me, I think the targets are 4 wins in the league and 13 overall. To me, if he gets there, all things being equal, that's a successful season. But I'm interested to hear how you answer that both ways.
I think that's in the right ballpark in terms of the number of wins. I think I'd like to set the bar a little bit higher. If you have 18 conference games, if you can win 5 or 6, I think that would be a very good jump, especially from last year. You just know where to go but up. And we've talked about this a lot, the non-conference schedule is manageable, and I think intentionally so. Hopefully you can get some more non-conference wins. But I think more important than the actual number of wins is this is how I would put it. When the SEC tournament starts, I would like to go into that tournament feeling good about where everybody has come from. In other words, has the team collectively gotten better to where whoever they're playing, wherever they're seated, are they going to be a tough out? Are they going to go in believing that they have a chance to win the game? I think that would mean a lot. I think going forward, win or lose from there, because think about how you felt going into the tournament last year, where you knew you were just kind of saying, just get this over with, right? I mean, it's just they were lost. And so if you can have a different feeling going into that conference tournament, I think that will tell you what you need to know.
Willie, we appreciate you joining us today. Please take the time to promote your show, the Predators, your Twitter account, or anything else like that as we close.
All right. Well, the radio show is daily, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. on 102.5 The Game, ESPN Radio Nashville. And, of course, Fox Sports Tennessee is where we broadcast our Predators games, and the next one is Saturday night. 3-game homestand coming up. We got Chicago on Saturday, then Tuesday it's Winnipeg, Thursday Vancouver. So 3 Western Conference opponents, 2 of them in the Central Division. So a lot of key games coming up here. It is early, but there's a very competitive in the Western Conference. So we're looking forward to that. You can follow me on Twitter at WillieD1025.
And Willie, also, thank you for being flexible with your schedule this week. I wanted to postpone this podcast so we could talk some basketball after we had a game where I think it was served as a good evaluation. So we appreciate you doing that, and we look forward to catching you again next week.
Yeah, can't wait. Yeah, I'm glad we had a few more games to check out, so we had more to discuss.
He is Willy Daunic of 102.5 The Game. I am Chris Lee, the host of the Vandy Sports Podcast. We appreciate you listening, and we'll be back with more episodes next week.